Good afternoon, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us from the University of Dayton CIO team. So now we get to hear from a little bit of a different perspective from serving customers at a university. And how do you do that? And what are some of the things that you do on a daily basis? So Matt, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And we're going to turn it over to you.
Hello. Can you all see my little screen?
Yes,
Absolutely.
we can.
Okay, so topic I got is release management. And I didn't have quite as much time to kind of prepare this as maybe I would have liked. So it's very informal. If you guys have any questions at all or anytime, please feel free to speak in or to jump in. I'm a very informal person and I'm happy to answer any questions as we go along, although I did set aside a little bit of time at the end as well. So just about me, my name is Matt Mize. I've been in Dayton for basically my whole life at this point now. Followed my mom here. My mom brought me here, I really should say, when she started working at the University of Dayton. Cleveland Browns fan, have been my whole life, or not my whole life, I guess, but for several years now. Feels like my whole life. And I'm a new dad for the third time, so I'm currently navigating a 7-week-old at home. And this is my wife's first week back on the job, so just trying to keep it all up in the air. And there he is. I mean, I don't know how that got in there. We'll be strictly professional from here on out. That's so funny. How about that? But my career. So my current title is a director of software and web engineering. I have a team of 7 people. One assistant director who kind of really handles the website of things for us. Like our responsibilities are primarily Java development for the university, as well as managing our primary web presence. So if you ever go to www.udayton.edu, we do a lot of work maintaining the look and feel of that page, as well as the functionality in such a way that it makes it easy for the content owners to put their information out there, right? And to keep it in a way that is uniform across all of those disparate units, right? Like the university, well, it's not necessarily a large organization if you were to think about like the corporate sphere, has a lot of disparate interests, right? Like we have to support both, you know, the advancement unit, people that are going out and asking for money, as well as the academic unit, people that are going out and telling students why they should come here, what the University of Dayton offers, all that kinds of stuff, right? When it comes to release management, my training has been very informal. My background is really that of a computer programmer. Like I said, I've been in Dayton basically my whole life now. I actually started at the University of Dayton straight out of high school, working their service center, answering phones and doing basic troubleshooting. And then right around my sophomore year in college, the university hired me full time and let me finish my degree as I was working full time. So I've been there for 20 years now. So a lot of what I know about release management is kind of, has just been like on the job learning and stuff like that. One of the things about the university is it was relatively, you know, when I was doing my programming, when I was starting to do that kind of stuff, I was kind of my own self-contained unit. So I was responsible for, I didn't realize it at the time, but for what's called the software development lifecycle, or SDLC, which I'll mention a couple more times as we go along here. And so I was responsible for like all aspects of that. I didn't realize it at the time, and I've certainly gotten a more formal understanding of it as I've gone along, but that's kind of how I got into this. So when I first mentioned to Tom that this is probably something I could do, I actually mentioned it in conjunction with 2 or 3 of the other things on the list as well, just because I looked at that and it was kind of like, these are all things that I could do, right? And then when he said release management is the only one that they still need, I went back and was really trying to get my mind around what release management meant. And so I started to fish around, and so I stole this definition from everybody's favorite source, obviously Wikipedia. It's the place to go if you ever need any information. And I just took it outright because as I started to think about it more and more, this kind of started to click for me why I felt comfortable talking about other topics as well, right? Including things like, I think systems analyst was the one that pops to my head that I thought I could talk about as well. But really, what I do now and what I've transitioned and what I try to do now for my team is I try to maintain all of these steps so that we are delivering something to the university on time, right? And so there are all of these steps, and that includes requirement gathering and then actually coaching them as they do their development work, working with the team to design and trying to be like almost like a go-between between the people at the university, the people that actually interact with the students more than I do and have this kind of vision for what they need from a product. So I'm trying to pull all of that together in a way that continues to deliver things on time, fixes the things that are out there, allows us to bring in new products and new projects and things like that, and just try to keep that all running smoothly. And this is kind of like an emerging field right now in computer science. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple models for the software development lifecycle. These kind of parallel with my journey in the development world and like how I got to where I am now. So the first one is people will talk about the waterfall model. This is kind of an old model, and it really, from my understanding, has its kind of roots in just the way that people used to work, right? Like, I mean, there's a certain way that you can draw a parallel between what my team does for developing software with what, not necessarily like building a product, but like building the factory that builds the product, right? Like a lot of what the work that we're trying to do is capture information from students in a way that the university can act on it. So we're designing these forms and these things to actually collect these data or to move the data around. So we're really kind of designing the thing that builds the item that the university wants to work with. So when you think about a waterfall model, that was one of these things where you would just do all of the planning up front, do all the work once and put it out there. It's kind of like building the factory that was going to let you build a car. Once that factory is built, you don't have a lot of wiggle room to go in and change things around that much. So that's why you needed to do all of this really upfront analysis and design, try to figure out where everything is, because once that thing is built, it would be prohibitively expensive to try to move stuff around, right? So when software first started doing it, this was kind of the model that people brought over from that and started to apply to software. Well, what they found over time is that this model, while it is good for some projects, and it still would be used for certain things, especially things like embedded systems, it wasn't necessarily the only way to do it, and it wasn't the right way to do it for a lot of things. What people would find is sometimes that planning phase could take 6 months or longer, a year or more. And by the time you actually have the requirements done, the world has moved on, right? So now all of a sudden, all of this thing that you've invested this time into planning and stuff like that, the world no longer needs. So that's just kind of a waste, right? Things of that nature. The other thing that people found is they did it is like, once you get down into this maintenance mode, they're like things in software stay around for years, right? So once you get down into this maintenance mode, you're constantly going through and trying to tweak it and improve it anyway. So kind of the next iteration of that was, they called it the Agile model. And the biggest difference between the Agile model and the Waterfall model was, instead of one big monolithic project where you kind of say, okay, we're just going to go through it, put it out there, and we're done, the Agile model relied on several iterative development cycles. So what you're really trying to do is understand a small chunk of the final product, get it done and get it out quickly so that both the people that are asking you to do it and your eventual customers can see it and give you feedback, right? This removes that problem that people ran into where they would design it for so long that by the time they were ready to release it, it was no longer relevant. Things of that nature. The other thing that I found is when I was kind of doing that waterfall model, it was really actually difficult for me to start working on new things. Because like, as I alluded to earlier, that maintenance model never really went away. So oftentimes planning for the next thing would be interrupted by these maintenance requests coming in on something that we had already deployed. And it was really difficult to try to balance those and do both of those things at the same time. What I found was when it came to trying to pull all that together, like what I found was people would just work on the thing that had come in that day or that week or even that year, right? Where the newest request was the thing that was always getting done, and we were not planning appropriately to do the next thing. So that was when I really tried to, so then that was when I sat down with my assistant director, Darren, and we decided to move from that to be very deliberate about how we approached our work. And that's where we tried to go to this Agile model, and specifically Scrum, if that's a buzzword that you're familiar with. So the Agile models have emerged in like the last 20 years. And then in the last 3 to 5 years, when it comes to release management, they've really started to talk about what's called continuous integration and delivery now, where it's just this net, like you just go in from the very start knowing that as soon as you have something that's ready for a customer to see, you want to get it out there, right? It's these very small chunks and it's very rapid deployment. And the whole industry is really starting to move that way, where they are actually starting to build tools and stuff like that that will support just putting these things out there, right? So you have all of these tools now that allow programmers to store and track all of the changes that are done to their code. And then as soon as the change is done to your code, you can say, this is ready to deploy. And just merely by saying that, the software systems will pick it up and put it into your production environments. So what we found is that a process that used to take a half a day and 7 people to take all of your code, package it up, and send it to the appropriate people so that they could put it in the appropriate places in a way that was coordinated appropriately so that there was no interruption to your customers. That used to take anywhere from a half a day to a full day. You can just now do that. The computer will do that for you because those rules were so well defined from the very beginning. And so these are all the buzzwords that anyone that might be interested in release management should probably know, specifically from managing a software project. As I've recently transitioned into this position of being a director, the other part of release management that is kind of becoming more important for me now is this whole concept of enterprise release management. And that's coordinating with the other units at the university. So for when we have broader, more strategic projects that are going on, we need to be able to say, coordinate them all, right? And say, this needs to go first so that we can do this, so that we can do this, and so on and so forth. And that's just about coordinating those individual releases within that larger team. So then when it comes to skills that I would look for people on my team, or that I would look for someone that maybe wants to do the same work as I do, coming up through my programming background, I think one of the things that I would emphasize to people is don't ignore those soft skills, right? Like honestly, I've kind of been dreading this presentation a little bit today because I didn't get into computers because talking to people was easy for me. Like if you were to put me on that introvert extrovert scale, I fall reasonably far on the introvert side, right? But when it comes to this kind of work, you cannot ignore those soft skills. You cannot put your head down and only do the technical side. Now, I suppose this might be partially due to my the liberal arts degree that the University of Dayton gave me, and emphasizing that kind of learning. But communication is hard, not just when you're trying to communicate to the university and the higher ups what your vision is, but even like within your own team. I think the example that I always go to is I've been working with the same guy for like 10 years. And we once had a 30-minute debate about what the term next meant, because we were trying to design something. He said, well, I'll just put it next to it. And for him, that next meant anywhere around it. And for me, next meant left and right. And it took us 30 minutes to understand how we had been defining that. So when you're talking to somebody that's interested in computers and are maybe looking at kind of transitioning to this position, don't ignore those soft skills. Second, do some formal training on these life cycle methodologies, whether it's Waterfall is the one that kind of mentioned, but the newer ones are things like Scrum and Kanban are terms that you might hear a lot. Both of those methodologies are very good. Me and my team use Scrum, and it's been very good for us. I'm a big believer in it. And if you kind of want me to talk about Scrum, I'm more than happy to do so. Kanban is something that I've read a little bit about, and I understand why certain teams would choose it to use their work. I know a lot of more advanced institutions will do things where they will have Kanban feeding into, like one Kanban board feeding into, say, 3 or 4 different Scrum teams so that they can all coordinate their efforts, things like that. And then the other thing that I can't emphasize enough is, if you're looking for this, try to have a clear vision of your end result going in. You know, so often what I run into is, as I'm doing this, is people will come to me and they'll try to give me a technical solution, right? The person at the university that wants something done comes and says, I need a database or something like that. And I have to be able to talk to them and really actually find out what it is that they need, because really what they're trying to do is track students that go through a certain thing, right? And that's not necessarily a database. There's all sorts of other things. Having that clear vision allows you to kind of know what dials to turn when it comes to trying to balance those things that you're doing when you're talking about release management, specifically your team's time, the university's expectations, and you know, delivering those things in a reasonable time. So, and I mean, that's what I could come up with when it comes to release management. Again, I've been very informally trained on this, so if you have any other questions, let me know. I could talk about the tools that we use a lot, but it didn't seem like that was really what this group was interested in so much as the broader picture.
Thank you, Matt. This is very informative. If anybody has any questions, why don't you go ahead and put them in the chat while people are thinking about their questions. I'll ask the basic question of, if you're going to hire someone, I know you briefly discussed it, what skills do you want them to have? I think that's great. You talked about soft skills. I think everybody who's been speaking before you, everybody's been saying soft skills, soft skills. It's really needed. And hopefully all the teachers, counselors, and students understand that that is a skill, not just the technical skills they need. So thank you for communicating that. Besides the communication of soft skills, what other skill would you recommend and when you're looking at hiring somebody?
Are you like, is this from a release management viewpoint, or is this just generally hiring onto my team?
You can do either one. From the release management perspective, and I would actually like to hear your hiring just from your team, because you are an IT team, you're a director of that, so you're looking overall. And I know people, when in the IT industry, they a lot of times will migrate from one position to the other. So it would be good to hear both sides.
So I'm okay. So for release management, I think I would want someone to come in with some sort of training, particularly on whatever model my team would be on. If I'm trying to hire someone to kind of manage our releases and keep that stuff in track, I would want someone with some sort of Scrum training. And it's relatively easy to go online and get that kind of training. A lot of organizations done it. I think I've been through training twice now and am kind of itching to go again, just to try to get that refresher. So if you're looking to get specifically into that position, some sort of, or experience with it. But if I'm thinking about people that are just out of school, by all means, go out and get trained. There are probably free resources out there. I've not looked into it too much, but definitely get trained on it. When it comes to hiring into my team, I will say that we've tried to move a little bit away from requiring college degrees. We're more comfortable looking at experience and things of that nature. So let's see, we just recently went through a hiring so like a year and a half ago, we went through a hiring process where we were able to get 2 people. Things that we looked for, I mean, we wanted a broad set of skills, and it was really about, for us, when we were hiring, it was about problem solving. So in addition to the interviews where we asked the kind of questions, at the end of the day, then we gave them, say, 5 problems across a different set of skills, just trying to kind of see where people were. And so for us, it was not really about them solving each particular question per se, because we knew that given the time constraints they had and the questions we were asking them to do, they weren't going to get it. If anybody had gotten all of them, I think in our years of doing interviews, I've not seen anybody get them all. If they had gotten all, that would have been incredible. So for me, it was more about how do they do their time management, and then and then we asked them to talk through what they did at the end. So it was about, for us, it was about confidence in being yourself, right? And I think that's true for both those questions that we asked ahead of time and the technical skills. We wanted somebody to be aware of what their own strengths were, talk about it, like what, so that, for example, on the technical questions, they could say, well, I started with this one because it's what I'm best at, and here's what I did. And then, you know what I mean? So like for me, and I don't know, maybe I'm odd, but for me, it is about being self-aware, right? And then just kind of owning who you are. That's what I look for in an interview. I want that kind of a diversity of opinion. I want someone that's going to have a strong point of view, so that when I am missing things, this person is going to be able to come to me and say, I don't think did you think about this? I don't think you thought about that. And maybe I'm in a unique place, right? Because we're very happy to give on the job training, as long as you have a baseline set of skills in something that we do, right? So we are more than happy to spend 6 months kind of, working through the finer details of what we do. I think in my experience from the technical side of things, the number of skills that people need to have, specific technical skills, it's a lot. And you're really not going to pick up a lot of them until you're on the job, or maybe just even messing around on your own, right? So if you're talking about a high school student, maybe they'll do it all on their own. So I would really encourage them to just get their hands wet and play around. Sorry,
Thank you very much. That's good advice. We do have one question, and it's, did you know release management was an opportunity in your first job search?
I did not know release management was an opportunity, and I think that, right, like when I was starting out, I don't think it was.
Mm-hmm.
I think release management is, when I talked about that agile methodology, release management is really something that's come to the forefront as agile methodology has grown and grown and grown, right? Because back in the day, it wasn't as big a deal to commit one day every 6 months to put everything out there,
Right.
As opposed to now, where you're like, like if you were to ever look at the version on your Google Chrome, for example, they're in the thousands of releases, because they're constantly trying to push small fixes out there as rapidly as possible. It's an interesting thing, because like release management, the way I've talked about it here today, is not necessarily something that I would consider to be an entry-level position either. Because for me, release management is about managing that team and managing those expectations around a product, right? So it's almost like, when I think about it, I think some of the other titles you might find would be something like a product owner, or even a project manager, those types of skills. I really didn't have, like I said, I didn't have a lot, but so as I was thinking about this more and more, I was almost like, wow, this is almost like a project management type position, right? Because it is about managing those resources and trying to find a good balance. So when I'm trying to think about other job titles within this cluster, I would say project manager would be another example of one, and so on and so forth. Now, for an entry-level position, you could talk about the person that administers those tools that automatically deploy things, right? So that's where you might talk about a systems administrator, somebody like that, who has the technical skills and the ability to go into one of these products and define the rules for how these products get released onto the production server. And that's, and so the university has a team of system administrators that oftentimes when we get a new product or deploy something brand new, we work with them to do the technical work of taking that individual packaged software piece and putting it in the appropriate locations so that it can run. But that to me was more of a systems administrator role, but it all kind of comes back together under that whole umbrella of that software development lifecycle and managing those releases.
Thank you. That was really informative. I know that release management is a relatively new concept. It's good to let students know what's available as they are planning their career paths. So thank you. We thank you for your time. We know you are very busy. We will let you go back and enjoy your new baby. Thank you again for all your time. We appreciate it. And for everybody who attended again today, thank you. We appreciate you attending. I do have a sign sheet up. It says that was a question. I do track that. So I do have a list of everybody who attended today. If you do have any questions, let me know. We will be continuing our series next week. Next Tuesday, we're talking about quality assurance and end user experience. And in the meantime, if you do have any questions or feedback, don't hesitate to reach out and provide it to me. We will be sending a survey out later on this week just to gauge on where your interest is on what we're doing and if you have any recommendations for the rest of the series. But thank you everybody for attending today, and we appreciate your time. Have a good week.